فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So where we left off in the Mutn Shujaa, in our last class we talked about the different we talked about the different types of salah that there are, such as the different types of the times for the salah, the sunnah, and also we talked about the conditions of the salah, and we went into some detail about that. And now, of course, as we talked about, like the shart is something that is a vital part, or it's a vital thing to the salah. Without it, there's no salah. But it's not necessarily like you want to say that it's a part of the salah, because it can be done without the salah, as opposed to the arkan. The arkan are something that are a vital part of they're a vital part of the salah itself, and it's something that of course without one of these, then the salah is invalid until you come with it. And of course, we'll talk about what happens if someone misses something. This is something that will come up, and we'll talk about this in the chapter that comes a little after this, when it comes to sahu. But in general, there's a few different parts of the salah. Like there's arkan, which is the plural of it's a jama' of rukn. And as I said, this is something that is a vital part of the salah, that it must be done for the salah to be valid. And then there's also things that are called ab'ad, and that's like the jama' of ba'd. And of course, ba'd is like part of something. And so this is a vital part, but it's not like the author here. He'll talk about it and he'll say it's sunnah. And he'll say the sunnah is like the tashahhud in the second rak'ah. That is like the first tashahhud. If you have a second one, then this one is something that he'll call a ba'd. And the ba'd is like, it's something that should be done, but at the same time, like if it's not done for whatever reason, someone misses it and they stand up, you don't go back to it, and it's something that's left, and you can make sujood sahwi for it. And so it's sunnah is how we would look at it. And of course, someone should be leaving the tashahhud al-awwal. But this is the way that they'll break it up. And so there's the arkan, and then there's the ba'd, and then there's hay'at. And hay'at is like the beautifiers of the salah. And so, these are the things that if you do them, great. If you don't do them, there's no sujood sahwi for you to do for leaving these things. These are something that is a part of like you could call it sunnah as well, or mustahabbat, but it's not something that is that requires anything from you if you miss it. And so these are the way that it's broken up. And in general, like if you were to look at like if you were to liken this to a person, you would say that the arkan are like the torso of a person, the neck of someone, his head. You know, like if you were to liken the salah to a person, and you would say like ab'ad is kind of like, it's something like fingers and whatnot. And then if you were to say the hay'at, it's like the hair. Like, you know, the hair is beautifying for the face. If you don't have eyebrows, you know, like it's kind of strange. But like you're still a person, and there's nothing that is like seriously wrong. And so this is if like you were to liken it to this is a likeness that has been given by some of the scholars, such as Al-Khatib al-Shirbini. He talks about this in Iqna', and he gives this likeness of these like the arkan is like the torso, the neck of someone, and then also the shurut. He also gave I believe he gave the likeness of that it's like the life. Like, you know, the life of someone. Like, you know, life is not something that is, it's something that you have to have it, but it's not necessarily you say it's like a part of that person necessarily, but it's like a condition for him, you know, to be doing stuff. So here the author, him going back to the arkan. So he says here, faslun wa arkanu salati 18 ruknan. And so he says there's 18 is 18 rukn. And so like this is that we have 18 of these pillars. And the way he breaks it into 18, this is one way that is broken in, and it's also broken up into 13. And the reason it would be broken into 13 is if you don't count the stillness inside of the ruku' and also the sujood and the sitting after the sujood and then the second sujood, that stillness that is in there, he puts this as a rukn. And some of the other, like in Al-Minhaj, Lin-Nawawi, he actually puts this as a condition for that rukn. So as a condition of that rukun is for you to be still in it. So he doesn't make it a separate rukun, but rather he says it's a condition for this rukun to be valid is for you to be still in it. And so if you were to take it without the stillness, then it would be 13. And so this is some of, like in the other books, you'll see that there's 13 rukun, and here he says that there's 18. So like there's like 18 here. And so this is just, the difference is whether or not you count the stillness as a separate rukun, or is it a part of that rukun. And so if you count it as a part of that rukun, then here it would be considered 13 if you consider it a part. But he breaks it, Abu Shujaa here, and rahimahullah, he breaks it into a separate rukun, even though it's like maybe putting it as a part is a better thing. But this is the view that he took here. And it's pretty much just semantics. So he says, of the first of these, he says, an-niyatu. And of course, this is the first thing, is to have the niyyah, innamal a'malu bin-niyyat. And so, of course, we need to have the niyyah for us coming into salah. And of course, without this, then of course, like you don't even begin the salah, as someone was asking about before. And this is do you need to say something, or do you need to say something in your mind for this? No, it's not. It's not something. It's not like a jumla, or it's not like a sentence that you say, and it's not a self sentence that you say. That's not the niyyah itself. And of course, the madhab, they talk about that it's it's mustahab for someone to lafuz bi niyyah, which is like to speak it before going into it. And this is of course based on the if somebody is not able to have their niyyah, then this is a means to get that niyyah, to make sure that your niyyah is there. And so a means to do something that's obligatory, that is helping you do something obligatory, is mustahab. And so this is the way that the madhab looks at it. And it's something that, and some people will say it's bid'ah and whatnot. And of course, if we were actually sure that this helps someone get that niyyah, then this is something you can look at, and you can consider it. But a lot of times this doesn't even accomplish this purpose. And if it doesn't accomplish this purpose, then the base for it isn't there. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. But what needs to be in the niyyah itself is that one is qasd. Like you need to have the qasd that you are praying salah. And this is one. And then you also need to have ta'yin. So if you're praying a salah, what salah are you praying? So if it's something that's obligatory, then you need to have what salah is this? Oh, okay, I'm praying salat Isha. So this is salat Isha, this is the one that I'm praying. And then you also need to have, is this something that's obligatory, or is it something that, if it's obligatory, you need to have the niyyah that this is obligatory. If it's not, then of course, if this is of the rawatib, you have the niyyah for the rawatib and whatnot. But if it's obligatory, you must have the niyyah that this is obligatory as well. And the only, all that we get from innama, when we have this word innama, this is something that breaks apart. The a'mal is only, or the actions are only according to the niyat. So this innama al-a'malu bin niyat. So we have that action is you're only going to get from it according to what you had in your niyyah. And this is of course without a doubt, this refers to the acts of worship. And so we need to make sure that niyyah is there for us to get to even get into the faridah. We need to have that niyyah. Of course, if somebody just has the intention to pray, they just want to pray salah, and they just stand up and say Allahu Akbar with the niyyah to pray salah, then they're praying a salah that has, it's sunnah, it's a sunnah salah. But which sunnah is it? No, it's not any particular sunnah. It's just something to get close to Allah. And so this works. But of course you can't, once you have this, if you're in this salah, this is something you pray, but it can't be changed into afterwards. It can't be changed into faridah. If you want to have a faridah, you need to start off with the intention that is the faridah, that it's of the obligatory salah. And of course you need to know which one it is. And also the niyyah is something that needs to be firm. It needs to be firm, that goes through the whole salat that you're going through. And it's something that you can't have the intention, that intention, even if you don't think about it, it needs to be there the whole salat. If you change that intention, you're no longer wanting to pray salah, then this is something that would break the salah. And we'll talk about that later. And the things that break the salah is leaving, having the intention to leave. And this actually breaks the salah right away. You don't even need to say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, as some people will do, because as soon as somebody had the intention to break the salah, it's done. And so this is of the arkan, and this goes through the whole salah. This is something that goes from the beginning to the end of the salah. And so this is niyyah. And then the second one, the author Abu Shujaa, he says, وَالْقِيَامُ مَعَ الْقُدْرَةِ. And so he says here that the qiyam, which is standing, ma'al qudra, is like with the ability. So of course for the people who are able to stand, and for someone if they're not able to stand, then this is something that they can pray however they're able to pray. Like if they're not able to pray standing, then they pray sitting. If they're not able to pray sitting, then they pray laying on their side. And so this is of course this comes in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ told one of the Sahabis that had like hemorrhoids to pray if you when he asked him about salah, then he said salli qa'ima, so it's like pray standing, and if you can't do that, فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدَةً, and then sitting if you're not able to, and فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ, like if you're not able to, then on your side, like laying down. And of course this person would do it laying down towards where they're facing the qibla. And so this is the way, and we'll talk about this later, what somebody does in that situation. But if someone's able to stand, then they need to stand. And sometimes there'll be people that they think because whatever reason, maybe it's hard for them to stand for a long period of time, that they can just sit down whatever they want for the obligatory salah. For the obligatory salah, if you're able to stand, of course without any like serious harm, then you need to be standing. And this is like your salah is invalid without that. And so sometimes there'll be people that if you were to walk up to them and give them salams and talk to them, they could stand for like a minute while they're talking to you, even if it's with a cane or whatever. But if they come into salah, they sit down and then they just like chill the whole salah because they can do this. But at the same time, maybe they're giving the adhan standing, and of course this is longer than the Fatiha. And this person needs to have the qiyam if they're able to do this. And of course, if they're able to make the qiyam for like 10 seconds, if they're able to stand for 10 seconds, they need to at least stand for the 10 seconds that they're able to do, such as like to say Allahu Akbar, like which is the first rukun, that is like said, then they need to do this as well. So they need to be standing for that Allahu Akbar. And then in general, the person should be standing at the beginning of the salah. If they're able to do this, then they should be standing at the beginning of the salah. And if they're able to stand for the Fatiha, then they need to stand for the Fatiha. Then after that, if they need to sit or something, that's something that is up to them. But of course, the standing for the opening takbir and also for the Fatiha is something that is a rukun that this person must do. And so this is of the first of them. Of course, if he wants to, like if someone's tired after like someone's having like a long recitation, he can sit down. Even if he's in like a group and whatnot, he can sit down while he's for like if someone say they're reciting like 5 pages or something, or 3 pages or something, and that person's tired, maybe they have a back issue or something where they have a problem standing, then they can sit down for that period, and there's nothing upon them if they're sitting down after they've recited the Fatiha. This is like in congregation and whatnot. And so then the next thing after, so we have the niyyah, and then we also have this standing for the one who's able. Then the third one is with takbiratul ihram. And this is, of course, takbiratul ihram is the way that we come. The reason it's called ihram is because it's the thing that makes everything else haram. So we're entering into a place where all of these other things that were once were available for us to do, or halal for us to do, such as talk, eat, move around, do whatever we want. Once we say Allahu Akbar, all of those other things that are outside with the regular things that we normally do, these become haram. And then now we have made these things haram so that we are focusing in salah. And so that's the reason it would be like takbiratul ihram, because this brings us into that state of it brings those other things that were once mubah, it brings them in a state of hurma. And so of course this is Allahu Akbar, and this is the way that someone would say it. And if somebody someone should never like make any difference in this wording in Arabic. Like if they say Allahu Akbar, sometimes people will say Akbar, and this is wrong. Like if someone did this, like the madhab would be that this person's salah is invalid. If he lengthens this like Akbar, as some people will do this, and they think they're giving it more emphasis, but this is actually the plural of kabr, and kabr is a drum. So of course, like this is if someone means this is like a type of kufr. If someone means the meaning that Allah is a bunch of drums, like this is of course most people don't ever mean this, and they don't even know that this is the meaning of when they make that long. But this is something that should never be changed. Like no one should ever be adding an alif after the ba of akbar, and so it should always be short. And this is like sometimes people have a little bit. If it's minor or if it's like a minor embellishment, that's something. But if it's a major embellishment, of course, this is a serious issue. And also the same thing with Allahu. Like they shouldn't make it like they shouldn't make it long. It should be Allahu Akbar, not Allahu Akbar. You know, it should be as it would normally be in like Arabic. And so also, if say somebody is a new Muslim and they don't know how to say Allahu Akbar, they could say God is the greatest, and they can say Allah is the greatest. They can say like Allah is the greatest is the better, or Allah is greater, or something of this sort. Anything like this is it's permissible for somebody to translate the adhkar of the salah into their language if they're unable to say it. And this goes for the tashahhud. It doesn't go for the Quran, because the Quran can't be translated. The Quran, it has to be in Arabic. But as far as all the other adhkar, it can all of it can be translated into the language of that person. This is of course if they're not able to say it, or if it's something that's hard for them to do. And like some of the adhkar is hard for them to pronounce, but they can say that in their native tongue. So this is permissible for them if they're not able to do that. And so this is for the first of these things, which is takbiratul ihram. And of course, this is something that is separate than the other takbirat. And so if somebody is coming into, salah and they're a little bit late and they find the imam in ruku' and they say Allahu Akbar and they're meaning to go down to ruku' with that, they need to have said this while they were standing, and they need to have intended that they're entering the salah with this takbir. Because this takbir is something that is rukn of the salah, and they need to be standing for it, and they can't be down they can't be in ruku' while they're saying, they can't say Allahu Akbar while they're down here. So because you said Allahu Akbar while you weren't standing, you were now in ruku'. And then if they were saying this with the intention of the movement of that takbir, that isn't the one that they enter salah with. So they need to enter the salah standing, Allahu Akbar, and then they can go down to ruku' as they wish. And also, we're talking here about all of the rukn. So he's going to talk later about the things that are sunnah for someone to do, and a lot of these will be in between these things, such as like raising the hands and whatnot. These will come in the next section here. So this is the takbiratul ihram. It must be said while the person is standing, and then also the next thing that he brings here after this is he says وَقِرَاءَةُ الْفَاتِحَةِ وَبِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ آيَةٌ مِنْهَا. And so he says in the next of the arkan, which is number 4, is the Fatiha. And so reciting the Fatiha, and he also says, and Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is from it. And so like this is a part of the Fatiha. And of course, if you look at it, if you open up the Mus'haf, all the Mus'hafs pretty much all of the ones that we read from, at the very beginning you'll see a 1 in front of Bismillah, or you'll see a 1 right after Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you'll see a number 1. And of course this is because in the Mus'haf it's actually written as an ayah, and it was written that way in the time of the Sahaba. And so they were very, very careful of whatever was written in the Mus'haf to only make sure that it was Quran. And so like the Mus'haf of the Sahaba was agreed upon that this is Quran. So without a doubt, like the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, it is a part of the Quran. Now some people have disagreed about whether it's a part of Fatiha or not. And this is something that goes back to some of it is the specialists of the reciters, like the riwayat or qira'ah that someone is reading in. So this is something that kind of goes back to them. But in general, the Shafi'i madhab is that this is a part of the Fatiha, and it takes the same ruling as the rest of the Fatiha. So it should be recited just like the rest of the Fatiha, which is also like saying it aloud is sunnah. Just like saying the rest of the Fatiha out loud is sunnah in its place. And so this is one of the things that you can tell a Shafi'i a lot of times, is that he'll recite with the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. He'll start off at the beginning, and he'll recite it out loud. And of course, this is something that there's a huge long discussion about it, and inshallah, this is something that will come up in later, like maybe in another book. You can talk about like the discussion why some people do it silently and some people, and there's a long discussion that goes into depth about hadith and whatnot, and differences in how hadith came in this way. And of course, this takes a little bit of understanding in mustalah al-hadith also, and reading this. And Imam as-Suyuti, he has a good discussion about this in Tadrib al-Rawi. So when he talks about in Tadrib al-Rawi, he talks about this masala in greater detail. He brings together a lot of the evidence of the Shafi'i madhab. And of course, this book is a book in mustalah al-hadith, but like he's got a lot to say about this masala. And of course, he's Shafi'i, and he like gives a lot of weight to the Shafi'i opinion that the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is a part of it's a part of Fatiha, and two, it's supposed to be recited just like the rest of the Fatiha out loud. And this is, of course, reciting out loud is sunnah, so that's one thing. And so this must be recited. If someone doesn't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim in the Shafi'i madhab, their salah is invalid because they didn't come with the rukn. The rukn starts from Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and to the end, wala dallin. And so all of this is rukn, and it has to be recited. All of this has to be recited. If they say it silently, their salah is valid, but it should be like the ruling is the same whether it's out loud, or like the ruling is the same for Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as it is for Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Both of it needs to be recited, and whether you're loud or are silent, according to the salah. And so the next thing after this is he's going to bring in the next of the arkan, is he says, وَالرُّكُوعُ وَالطُّمَأْنِينَةُ فِيهِ. And so he says, and also the ruku', which is of course we know like the bowing with tuma'nina fihi. And tuma'nina is that stillness that needs to be there. And of course, like this is where the bones settle into their place. And so someone shouldn't be coming down and coming up right away without them settling for that like, maybe it's like 2 seconds before they could say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. So if they're able to say this, then that time while they're still, okay, this counts. But if they're just moving constant, then there's no stop in the movement, they're just doing like that doesn't count. They need to have that tuma'nina. And of course, this comes like the evidence for this, and also the evidence for most every single, all of these arkan, except for the last tashahhud. All of this comes from the hadith, which is famously called al-Musi' salatahu. And so, like, this is the hadith where there was a man that came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's narrated by Abi Hurairah. And so that there's a person who came into the masjid. And he came into the masjid and he prayed, and then he came and gave salams on the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Prophet ﷺ gave him salams and he said, "Irja fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli." He said, "Go back and pray because you haven't prayed." And fasalla thumma ja'a fasallam ala an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam faqala irja fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli. And so he says the same thing, repeat it again. And he repeats this multiple times, 3 times. And then the man says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Walladhi ba'atha bil haqqi ma uhsinu ghayrahu." And he says that, like, he swears by the one who who sent the Prophet with truth sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, I don't know anything better than this. There's nothing else I can do. Like ma uhsinu ghayrahu. I don't know how to do better than this. Fa'allimni. And he says, so teach me. And so then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ. And so this is the first one, standing up to salah. And of course, it's salah, so there's the niyyah, and there's the standing. So those are the first two. فَكَبِّرْ تَكْبِيرَةَ إِحْرَامٍ. And then he says, ثُمَّ اقْرَأْ مَا تَيَسَّرَ مَعَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. And then read what is easy for you to read from the Quran. And in another riwayat from Imam al-Hakim, he says, بِأُمِّ الْقُرْآنِ, which is the Fatiha. And so there's that. And then he also says after that, ثُمَّ ارْكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا. And then he says, then go and make the arka, which is of course the ruku', until you tatma'inna raki'a, until you're still in that state. And of course, like, these are the next two. And then he also says, ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَعْتَدِلَ الْقَائِمَةِ. And then come up until you're straight up. تعتدل, which means that you're standing straight up, قائمة. ثم اسجد حتى تطمئن ساجدا, then go into sujood until you're there still. ثم ارفع حتى تطمئن جالسا, and then come up until you're sitting. And then ثم اسجد حتى تطمئن ساجدا, then go back to sujood until you're still in your sujood. ثم افعل ذلك في صلاتك كلها. And so then do this in the rest of your salah, all of it. And so of course, like from this hadith we can kind of understand, like since he repeated the hatta tatma'inna jalisa, or all of these hatta tatma'in, we can understand this was probably the issue that the man was having in his salah, was that he wasn't still in his salah. And of course this is something that must be done. And in general the Shafi'i madhab, they take this hadith and they say this is the basis. Everything that's mentioned here is the bare minimum for salah, except for the last tashahhud. This comes with other evidence. But all of the things that are mentioned in this hadith, these are the arkan, and anything other than this is something that is extra. And the reason they do this is because this man was given the bare minimum for what his salah would be. Like, this man is the one who was given the bare minimum for what would make his salah acceptable. And so this is where they take, and then all the other evidences from what the Prophet ﷺ used to do, all of this would be like something that is like mukammila, that would be something that is extra and that like perfects the salah from other things. But as regards to the bare minimum, this is what the Prophet ﷺ told this man who was in need of knowing how to pray, and this was what was known for him. And so these are, and then we'll go through, and he says, after we talked about ruku', حتى تطمئن راكعة, with وطمأنينة فيه. And so I'm putting these two together because this will come in later. And then also الرفع والاعتدال وطمأنينة فيه. And then also coming back up and standing up and being still in that. And this is also something that a lot of people, they come up when they're praying by themselves especially. They'll come up and they'll go straight down. Like, there's no stop. They'll just go right up and go right back down. And there must be that طمأنينة. There must be that طمأنينة when this person comes back up. They got to be still. And then they can go back down. And most of the madhabs will actually say that this person's salah is batila if he doesn't stop, if he doesn't have a stillness while he's standing, and he goes down without that. And so then he also says وَالسُّجُودُ وَالطُّمَأْنِينَةُ فِيهِ, and then also going into sujood, and also the stillness inside of sujood. And also talking about going back to ruku', I missed a couple things. When somebody comes in ruku', there is a bare minimum that must be done. And the bare minimum is that their back comes down to a point where their arms can reach their knees. If they were put out their arms, for their arms that are like a normal arms of someone, like, could be at the level of their knees. And so this is the bare minimum for someone in ruku'. And so their arms need to be at a point where they're able to touch their knees with their hands. And also, like, the sunnah for it is, of course, that their head is not like a horse, where it's not like up, and it's also not like a donkey where their head is all the way down. So their head should be like parallel. And sometimes people say you should be looking at the place in front of you. Okay, look with your eyes. You don't need to have your head pointed straight up while you're in there. And like having your back flat is sunnah. This is something that's sunnah, and he doesn't talk about this later on. So I'll give you some of the sunnahs for that. And of course, like where do you look while you're in your salah? In general, look to a place where you aren't distracted. And this is something that it doesn't mean like there's no like really clear evidence that says to look to the place of your sujood, although a lot of times this is something that is like advised, but there's no clear evidence from this from the sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ used to look to the place where he would make sujood. And the hadith that is used for this is actually it's not clearly stating this. It's like this hadith is actually talking about the Prophet ﷺ after he made salah around the Kaaba. When he was leaving, he was looking at the place where he was making sujood, and this is not in the salah. And so some of the people, they took this meaning that he was looking at the place in his of sujood while he was in the salah, but there's no clear evidence for that. But in general, it's recommended for someone to look somewhere where it's not disturbing for them. So if someone's in a fancy masjid and there's lots of whether there's decorations or cool tilings or all kinds of cool artwork in there, just to look around and whatnot. Of course, looking down in a place that is not distracting, this is what's required. Or this is what will give that person the most out of their salah. And so also with the standing, we talked about that. But with sujood, what is sujood composed of? Sujood is composed of the person's head needs to be on the ground, like their forehead needs to be touching the ground, like their forehead. There can't be a barrier between their forehead and the ground. Like something from their forehead, which is this part, like the jabha, something from it needs to be touching the ground as well as the nose. As the Prophet ﷺ said, "Umirtu an asjuda ala sab'a idam." That he said that he was commanded to make sujood and seven bones, and of these that he mentioned was like he pointed to his nose when he talked about his face, and also like the jabha as well as the hands. The hands need to be on the ground, and so the hands should be flat on the ground. They should be flat on the ground. Some people do this thing where their fingers are on there and they're, I don't know, they go like this and they don't put their palm on the ground. Their palm should be on the ground. And this is for their salat to be sahih, like their palm actually needs to be on the ground, and this is something that Imam an-Nawawi, he talks about, that the palm needs to be on the ground, and there's of course there's a little difference between him and Rafi and like in the sujood, but the palm should be on the ground, and also the head should be firmly on the ground, and if there's any barrier between the head and the ground, so maybe he's wearing a hat and his hat comes up over his head, and so there's nothing that is touching from his forehead on the ground. So if he were to wear like this and he was going to go on to sujood, his sujood would be invalid because this hat is preventing his forehead from touching it. So he needs to make sure that there's at least some part of his forehead. If he was doing this and he had like a little part of his forehead that was touching, like that was here, like okay, this would count. But of course, some people they'll go extra and they'll pull back their hat, as you know a lot of Somalis do. They'll pull back their hat that normally would be here. They'll pull it back all the way and flip it up, and while they're praying salah, and then they'll finish off their salah so that their head touches the ground. Of course, Somalis are for the most part Shafi'is, and so I noticed this with them, and this is something. Once I learned about it, I was like, okay, this is what they're doing, and so this is of course like the jabha. It should be firmly planted on the ground because of what the Prophet ﷺ said, "Famakin jabhak," that he said jabhatak, and that the Prophet ﷺ commanded for the head to be firmly like the jabha, which is that forehead, to be planted firmly on the ground. And so also the palms should be flat, and the toes also need to be on the ground as well, because these are from the seven like the body parts that need to be on the ground are the toes themselves. So the toes also need to be on the ground for the person, as long as they don't have like some serious injury and whatnot. But this is also another mistake that we see a lot of times, where some of the people, they'll have their feet dangling, and so this dangling foot disease is not something that like this is something that renders people's salat invalid, as these are the seven parts that need to be put firmly into place while they're in sujood. And also and this is of course of what Imam an-Nawawi, he talks about, that the feet need to be on the ground, and if not, then their salah is invalid. And Rafi, he's a little more open in this, but in general the madhab follows upon what Imam an-Nawawi says in this. And so then also the backside, so the backside of the person, they should be up, like the backside should be up higher than like the shoulders, and so their backside should be up. So if they're like down in what would you call it, like prayer pose, like in the yoga people, they call it prayer pose, but they're basically down on their thighs, and there's no like elevation to the backside, then this would not be valid. The backside needs to be elevated over the shoulders while in sujood for it to be considered sujood. And so this is another part of what is the composition of sujood itself. And of course, like I added these extra things into this, which aren't necessarily in the Mutn here, but I add these because this is something that's important for people to know, in general for their salah. And so of the next thing that he says here, after we talked about the sujood, we also talked about the being still in the sujood. He also says, "Wal julus bayna sajdatain," and also sitting up bayna sajdatain, wa tuma'ninatu fihi, and also when someone sits between these two sujood and being still in that. And this is something that is this is a rukun for them to sit and to be still in that. And also the next thing that he says here is "Wal julusul akhir wa tashahhudu fihi," And so he says, in the last sitting, this wasn't necessarily involved in the hadith that we mentioned, the Musiyah Salah, but this is from other evidence that is very clear that the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed this way always. And so this was something that was, and also like for tashahhud to be done, it needs to be done in this way. And the last tashahhud is something that the Prophet ﷺ commanded people to do. So from this we get that this is obligatory. And so this is in julus al-akhir, so like sitting the last time before giving the salams, and also the tashahhud fihi. This is also a part of the rukn. Both of these are rukns. And so also the wassalatu ala nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fihi, and also the salah saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. This is something that is a rukn for someone to do at the bare minimum. So if they did all of these things, these bare minimum, if they did all of these 18 things, like these 18 things, then their salah would be, or the last one is taslim al-ula, then their salah would be valid. And so this is the bare minimum, of course, that he mentions here. The salat ala nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Like this is the bare minimum. And some said wa ala ali Muhammad. And so like some of them added this extra bit that needs to be said. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam fi dhalik. And so, of course, there's the whole thing is much bigger than that. Of course, the tahiyyat. There's different versions of at-tahiyyatu al-mubarakatu as-salawatu at-tayyibatu lillah. This is like one of the versions, and this is the one that is like preferred in the Shafi'i madhab. And there's also other versions. In any of these versions, if they're narrated from like the authentic versions and whatnot, this is something in general, like do this one this way or do it another way or choose from these. And there's no problem with doing different versions of it as long as it's like something that's narrated. And the difference of narration is proof that you can like choose this or that, and it's not something that is a variation. Like this is what you would call like a khilafat tanawwu', which is like this is a difference of different variations of the same thing. In general, like the tashahhud, if you say it at-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibatu, and like this is different than at-tahiyyatu al-mubarakatu as-salawatu at-tayyibatu lillah. Of course, it's a little different, but as long as you take one of these, then this is what is like it's important. And so also the same thing with Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. Some of them will say kama sallaita ala ali Ibrahim without the extra, and both of these are good. And the same as wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, and some of them say Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. With some of these various differences, all of it is good. And of course the rest of this is something that is sunnah for someone to do. And so these are the salah and the tashahhud, and then also the last of them is at-taslimatul ula. And taslim is saying assalamu alaikum. And so this is what is required for the person to exit the salah. And wa rahmatullahi is the sunnah. Wa rahmatullah. This is sunnah for someone to do, and the second time is also sunnah. He'll talk about it later. And also what's important for someone to know is when they say this assalamu alaikum, when they say this, they need to say as-salam, like the al at-ta'rifiyah. Here it needs to be there. Like if someone says salamun, they said salamu alaikum without the assalamu alaikum. And I'm overdoing it a little bit just so you can hear it. But if they didn't say assalamu alaikum, but they just said salamu alaikum, then this would be invalid, because they didn't actually give the taslim as it is narrated with the assalamu alaikum. And this is as the Shafi'i madhab, they're very clear about this person needs to have assalamu alaikum. They need to have the al-ta'rifiyah for assalamu alaikum, and without it it's not valid. Sometimes when you hear people around you, if they do it, a lot of times they'll do it softly because they're so used to doing it, but in general like this isn't something to go overboard when you hear people around you. But in general, you should always make sure that you're always saying assalamu alaikum, and if you're ever teaching people, make sure that they're doing this, and make sure that they know that the assalamu alaikum, this is how it's narrated, and this is how it should be done, as it was only narrated in this way. And taking it off needs some evidence to prove that this is something that's okay. And so here the وَنِيَةُ الْخُرُوجِ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ he adds another thing here, and this is actually something that is it's debatable. There's this thing is not actually, most of the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab say that no, the having the intention to leave the salah takes you out of salah as soon as you have the intention, and this is not this is not something that you need to get out of the salah. Like you saying the assalamu alaikum, that takes you out of the salah. And so you having the intention with that to take you out of the salah, this is something that is not necessary for someone to do. And so there's no clear evidence for this. And a lot of times they'll talk about this is like the end of Hajj. So you have or like the end of Umrah, when you would have like the tahleel for like cutting your hair. Do you have to have intention for you cutting the hair to come outside of ihram? And they say no, it's something that this action is the action that takes you outside of ihram, and like that is the leaving the salah when you say assalamu alaikum. That action takes you out. And it takes you outside of the salah itself, and there's no need for you to have the intention to stop the action, because the action, once it's ended, there's no need for an intention for that ending. That ending happens with or without the intention. And of course, if someone has the intention before then, that takes them out as well. So it's a little problematic there. And some of them say that it is sunnah, like they'll say it's sunnah to have this intention to leave the salah, and this would be at the end of you saying assalamu alaikum. You would have the intention at the end of this that you're leaving the salah with this saying, with you saying assalamu alaikum, and you'd have the intention that you're leaving. And so this is leaving the difference of opinion in that, and that's the only reason they would say that. And so then also with tartib al-arkan ala ma dhakarnahu, and so also the doing, you need to do all of these rukun in this order, and taking any of these rukun out of order is something that breaks the salah, of course. And it's also he makes it here a pillar for the tartib, is a pillar to do this. And as we mentioned before, some of the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, they take the ruling of, like when we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to pray in this way, in this format. So this format that the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed in, this action takes the ruling of that it's obligatory to do in salah. If he had this format, we take that same format from his actions, and we say this is obligatory in salah, and it's a rukn. And this is an example of how the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, as we're talking in al-waraqat, how this becomes something that is obligatory, because this is the way the Prophet ﷺ did it. And also he said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. And of course some of the extra things, they're taken out of consideration with the hadith that we mentioned before of the person who was bad at praying, musi'u salatu. And so this is in general, these are the arkan here. And so we mentioned here these are like ثمانية عشر, these 18 arkan, and if you were to take out the tuma'nina, then it would become like 13, or this is normally what it would be without these. And so also he says وَسُنَنُهَا قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهَا شَيْئَانِ. And so he says in the sunnah for salah, before coming into it, قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهَا, before going inside of salah, there's two sunnah, and of these two is the al-adhan wal-iqama. And so both of these are sunnah for someone to do before coming into that. And also some of these things we'll say are sunnah. They're sunnah for the individual, but one of the views of the Shafi'i madhab is that this is, and the stronger of the views, is that the adhan is something that's fardu kifaya. And we'll talk about fardu kifaya, which is that somebody needs to stand up with the adhan for each like city, or like city that there are people in that, like there are Muslims in that city. If there's like a few people in that place, or wherever they're residing, if there's a few Muslim men there, then someone needs to stand up with the adhan. And the evidence for this, of course, is the Prophet ﷺ, he used to wait before attacking a village. He would wait until like the Fajr came in, and he would wait. Did he hear an adhan from them or no? Before he would go and attack like a qaryah or something of this sort. And if he heard an adhan, then he would not attack them. But if he didn't hear an adhan, then he would attack them as if they weren't Muslims, because of course a Muslim would hold up with the adhan. And so this is evidence that's used to show that in general it's something that is obligatory for at least somebody from the area to hold up, to bring up the adhan. And so this is like fardu kifaya. And so of course, like if somebody left this, the madhab would talk about that this group that left off the adhan, they said we're not going to do the adhan. Then they would like the imam of the Muslimin, they would go fight them until because this is them leaving of the shariah of Islam, like of the big things of Islam that we know Islam by. If someone like purposely leaves it off, this is something that they would actually be fought until they bring it back. And wallahu ta'ala alam. So this is for the adhan, and then the iqama is also something that is narrated, that is also narrated for someone to say. And of course, there's the slight variation between the adhan and the iqama, and as we have for the adhan, that this was something that the person will say multiple times. So you say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So we have two of these times. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. And so we have this these two and two. Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala al-falah, Hayya ala al-falah. Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. And so this is the adhan. And there's two variations for the adhan. There's one where you can do it with tarjih. And so the first one I did is without tarjih. And with tarjih, it's called like tarjih, is like bringing it back. This is also a way that the Prophet ﷺ, he taught some of the muaddin. He taught one of the muaddins to say silently before saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He said to have him do this quietly. So before going in, so he says Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Of course, not elongating the Akbar as some of these people do, and that's very wrong. And they should be taught. And like if you see someone and if you can tell them that this is incorrect and Akbar is a bunch of drums, so that they know, then this is something we should try to make sure that nobody is ruining the adhan in that way. But the tarjih is for them to say after they finish Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, they would say silently before saying out loud. They would say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. They would say this silently, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Then they would come back, and this is the tarjih, which is like the ruju'. They're going back and they say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And so this is the other way of doing it. Both of these are sunnah, and if someone is giving the adhan, they should do it both ways. They should do it sometimes this way and sometimes that way, so that they're not missing out on any one of these sunnahs. And so this is the way of doing it. Of course, going from the right to the left while they're doing the hayya ala and the hayya ala, going to the right and then also going to the left. And this is of the sunnah for the adhan. And now for the iqama is shorter. So of course, when someone says the iqama is shorter, so they don't repeat Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. They don't repeat this Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, and that's just one time. Hayya ala salah, one time. Hayya ala al-falah, one time. Qad qamatis salat, qad qamatis salat. Of course, this is two times, and this is the different thing. Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. And of course, this should be done faster than the adhan. And this is something that's for the people to come up and stand while they're doing this. And so this is the iqama, and there's of course there's the slight difference between the iqama and the adhan and the way that it's done. And also no one should be adding when they say Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, they shouldn't be adding Sayyidina Muhammad. They shouldn't be adding the Sayyidina. This is a bid'ah that some people have tried to add into it, some of the Sufis and whatnot. And actually the madhab is very, very clear when it comes to this thing, that they actually will number the amount of letters in the adhan, the words and the letters. They'll give it an exact number so that nobody adds anything into it. This is something that's ta'abbudi, and you can't add Sayyidina here. And whether or not you think that this is more proper and it's more respectful to say Sayyidina or not, this is an adhan, and this is the way that it has been narrated, and we don't change a thing in it. And changing it is something that's bid'ah. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab in this masala, even if some of the later people of the Sufis want to change things in that. And so this is the adhan and the iqamah. These are, as he said, these are sunnah, and these are sunnah for the individuals. And as we mentioned, the adhan is something that is fardu kifaya for the mantiqa, or like the place that the Muslims resided. And also he says here, وَبَعْدَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهَا شَيْئَانِ. And he says after coming into the salah, there's two. And he's talking about sunnah. And so as I mentioned before, the salah is broken into arkan, which is like the pillars, and then it's also broken into abad. And abad, as I mentioned, was like fingers and whatnot. It's something that it's a vital part of the person, but without it, he still lives and he can still do things. And so like the tashahhud is the first one of these things, which are the abad, which he calls it sunnah, because if you were to leave it, then this like if this person left it and he didn't make sujood as-sahw afterwards, then his salah is still valid. And this is the tashahhud al-awwal, not the second one, but it's the first tashahhud. This is something that's sunnah, and so this is the way that like the Shafi'is they break it up. And the tashahhud al-awwal, like the first one and the second rak'ah, this is something that's sunnah for this person to do, and they call it sunnah here, but it's something that's very important for someone to do it. No one should be leaving this purposefully, but if they do leave it, they don't go back to it. And then we'll talk about this later, what someone does if they forget something. And so this is the first tashahhud. And also you would add to this the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. You would add this to the tashahhud al-awwal as something that should be done as a sunnah. And so also then the next thing he says of the two, he said the shay'an of the second of the sunnahs is, he says wal qunutu fi subhi fi al-witri fi al-nisfi al-thani min shahri Ramadana. And so he says wal qunuti fi subhi wa fi al-witri nisf al-thani. So he says al-qunut, which is the standing and saying Allahumma hadina fi man hadait. And so to the end of this siga, and also with that wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, like at the end in sending salams on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the part of the qunut that should be done. It's a sunnah for it to be done in subh. And this is something that's narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do this, and this was like there's many hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do this, and then in particular at the for subh, this is also narrated that in like authentic narrations that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do this for the Fajr prayer. And so of course, like someone who like you'll find like one of the ways that you'll know someone is Shafi'i is if they do this, because a lot of times other people won't do that. And if somebody says it's bid'ah, then this is not like sometimes people will get on the Shafi'i madhab and say this is something that's bid'ah and whatnot, but actually it's something that's sunnah, and there's actually narrations that are authentic that show that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do this. And so this is something that is sunnah. And also, as he says here, if this is something that's sunnah, if someone forgets it, we'll talk about later, if someone forgets it, then this is something they would do sujood as-sahw for. And just like the tashahhud, this is also something that is sunnah. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so he says this is at the end of Fajr, and he also said وَفِي الْوِتْرِ فِي النِّصْفِ الثَّانِي مِنْ شَهْرِ Ramadan. And also this is in witr, in the last like the last prayer for witr, and the last half of Ramadan. So when someone is standing up in witr, this is also something that is sunnah for them to do at this time, and it would also necessitate, if someone left it off, it would necessitate the sujood as-sahw. And of course the sujood as-sahw itself is sunnah, because it's in replacement of something that's sunnah, so it wouldn't be wajib. And so this is also something else this is the other time. So there's two times, whether it's in Fajr or whether it's at the last half of Ramadan, in the witr. And so these are the as he says here, there's sunnah, and what a lot of the other scholars will say abad, which is their major part, like it's a major part of the salah, but and it's something that you would do sujood as-sahw for leaving it off. And then the next part that he'll go into, he just says وَهَيْئَاتُهَا, and these are the beautifiers of the salah, and we'll go into this inshallah. Just a couple notes is like in some other madhabs, each madhab they have their own way and terminology of breaking up the salah. And so like if you studied like the Hanbali madhab, for example, they have their salat that they'll break it up, and they'll have like their arkan, and then they'll have their wajibat. and then they'll have their mustahabbat, or their sunan. And so they break these up into arkan, which are obligatory, and then they'll say wajibat, which is like they would have like the tashahhud, as well as they would add some of the things that are in hayat. They would add some of these as wajibat, so that it would be something that if they missed it, they would have to make sujood sahu for it. And this is the terminology that people will break it into. This is something that is specific for each madhab. So of course it's best for someone to learn whatever the madhab that they're taking. They learn that madhab with its terminologies, because these don't always go in the same way. And there's some things that are wajib and some things that are fard in different madhabs. But here we have fard and we have fard or arkan. This is the two words that mean the same thing in salah. And then we also have sunan or abad. And these are those major things. And we also have hayat, which are like the mustahabbat, which don't require anything if they're left off. And so so he says here, وَهَيْئَاتُهَا خَمْسَ عَشْرَةَ خَصْلَةً. And so he says, and also like the hayat, which is the beautifiers. This is like you would say in like Arabic, meaning the hayat is like something that's beautifying. The salah is, there's 15 of these. Of course, there's many more than this, but this is what he brings up here. And some of the scholars, when they talk about like if you look at Sifat al-Salah, you'll find that some of them talk about how many like sunnah are there in salah, and some of them will talk up into the hundreds of how many sunnah there is for salah, whether it's coming the way you go to the salah, the way you go through it in all of these different ways. There's a lot of different things, and of course he brings up 15 here for this, and this is just, of course, this is a beginner book and whatnot. And of course you can get a book that goes into more of the details of this as well, that go into some of the scholars. They write books and just specifically on the salah itself, and such as like Sifat al-Salah. And so here the author here, he brings in, he says the first of these is Raf al-Yadayn inda takbirat al-ihrami. And so he says that raising the hands, and he gives a couple different places. The first place he says inda takbirat al-ihram, and this is when someone starts off that first takbir, and this is he says inda, which means at that same time. So someone, when they're saying Allahu Akbar, then that's when they raise their hands while they're saying it. And of course, if you raise it before or after, this is all sunnah, so it doesn't affect the salah, like its validity. And he says into takbirat al-ihram. And how do you raise it? There's two different ways that are narrated. One, that the Prophet ﷺ used to raise it up to his, like the furu' al-udhunayn, which is like the furu' would be like the tops of the ears and whatnot. And so this is one way. And then there's another way, which is to the shoulders. And so someone could raise it up to the shoulders, where you had the, and so like where it's at the same level. And so putting between these two narrations, some of the scholars, they have one narration that talks about the shoulders, and they have another one about the ears. So some of them will put between them, it'll say the palms are at the shoulders and the tops of the fingers are at the ears. And so they put both of these narrations together. But in reality, one narration could be taken this way, where you have it at the shoulders, and the other one could be at the ears, or you could have it at the middle, and Allah knows best. But all of this is just what is best. It's not an issue of whether or not the salah is valid or not. And also, if someone's coming into ruku' from the beginning, they're catching with the imam, do they need to raise it 2 times? Of course, there's one for coming into salah for raising it, and if they want to raise it another time to go down, this is also another thing. But if you see someone that just raises it once and goes down, this is sunnah. Even the raising itself is sunnah. And so then also he says here, وَعِنْدَ الرُّكُوعِ وَالرَّفْعِ مِنْهُ. And so he says also the other time for it is when someone is going into ruku' while they're going down. So the time that they're going down is while they're doing it. Sometimes you'll see some of the people, they'll raise their hands whenever they think that the recitation is going to end. And this is, of course, like the evidence that the Prophet ﷺ used to raise his hands when he was doing ruku' and when he was coming out of ruku'. So some of the times people, when they think the person is coming towards the end, they'll raise their hands and then they're just waiting for him to end. And of course, they should do it when they're actually going down. And then also coming up from ruku', this is also another time to raise the hands. And of course, this is something that's narrated from many hadiths that are sahih. And so like the difference of opinion when it comes to whether or not someone is allowed to raise their hands or not, or like this is something that, of course, without a doubt, like the raising of the hands is something that's prescribed, and there's no doubt about raising their hands while they're coming into ruku' and out of ruku'. This is something that is that is prescribed without any doubt. And some of the like scholars, such as Imam al-Bukhari and also Ibn Qayyim, they wrote books about just the raising of the hands, as this is something that should be done. And of course, like the madhab Hanafi in this particular issue, they are known for not raising their hands during these times. Of course, we never say that their salah is invalid, but if they're going to get on someone's case for raising their hands or thinking that their salah is invalid for raising their hands because of whatever the evidence is, there's many sahih hadiths that point to this, and the evidence is very strong in favor of that this is something that's prescribed. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so he gave 3 times. One while when we do the takbir to ihram at the beginning, and then when we go down into ruku' and when we come out of ruku'. And there's also one other time when someone stands up, that's also narrated in the Sahihain, is when somebody stands up from the first tashahhud. When they stand up from the first tashahhud, this is also another time to raise the hands. And this is not included in like the Mutn Shujaa, but this is something you could add there. And also the wad wal yadayn ala shimal. And so talking about where do you put your hands putting your right hand on your left. And of course there's different ways to do this. You could put it like this, or you could put it like this, or you could put it over here, because the yadayn, the yad goes all the way up to here. All of this is yad. But in general, this would be something on the forearm. It wouldn't be something that you're like holding your arm in this way, but something on the forearm, or if you're going to go like this, or like going like this. And he says here on your shimal, like put the right hand on the left hand. This is something that's sunnah for someone to do. And also, like, where do you put it on your chest? Do you put it on your chest? Do you put it over your heart? Do you put it on your belly? You put it under your belly? Really, there's no like hadith that is very clear about this that is authentic. There's no authentic hadith that is clear about where do you put your hands. So anywhere that someone puts their hands on their chest or on between their chest and their belly button, like if you'd have your belly button and then having your hands on your chest before on top of the belly button between the rib cage, this is something that the Shafi'is, they lean towards this as the best of places to put it, but all of it is permissible. There's no problem if you put it below your belly button. If you put it above, you put it on your chest. Of course, putting it on your heart, this is something that kind of goes, it's kind of like something extra that if someone thinks that there's something special about this, like you need some evidence for that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam where that evidence is, and I haven't seen anything for like the specification of putting it on the side or whatnot. This is not something that there's like that I know of. At least I've never come across any hadith, or anyone who's done this has never given me a hadith that talks about this that is clear. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So this is the where do you put your hands, and then also the next thing he says what tawajjuh. And he says what tawajjuh, and tawajjuh is kind of a tafa'ul, and this is a way of like saying he's referring to this opening supplication. And of the opening supplications that someone would say after they come into salah at the beginning is وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And so like this is of this opening supplications that someone can say when they come in. And there's also other opening supplications, and to switch it between this and that is something that's good for someone to do. As with any of the supplications that are at a certain time, and you have other supplications that are also narrated that's at this time, to change it up. And this is something that keeps the salah fresh, and it keeps the person engaged in the salah when they're going through, and they pray it in different ways, and so it doesn't just become a pattern where they just go through it without thinking. And so changing from one thing to another is a good way to make sure that this person is actively engaged in their salah. And of course the salah, you only get from it what you ma yaqilu minhu. And so like what he understands from it, like the person only gets the reward of what he understands when he's going into in the salah. What he's aware of, this is the extent of his reward. If he's not even focused in his salah, then he's only going to get a very minor reward from this. And so then the next thing he says, wal isti'adha, and al-isti'adha is saying a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and this is in general to be done before reciting any Quran. So whenever someone is going to recite Quran, so they would always recite A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and this is in the salah, and this would be done every single rak'ah. This is something that's sunnah to do every single rak'ah before reciting Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Before reciting this, which is of course all of that from the Bismillah to the end, this is obligatory, like this is the rukun. And so, but saying A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and then you start Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah. And so this is sunnah to do every single rak'ah. And so it's not just the first rak'ah, but it's every single one. And of course, this is something that is done sirra. Like this is something that you don't say it out loud, but rather you say it under your breath. And all of the things that are done sirran, like that are supposed to be done silently, as some people misunderstand, they think that silently means doing it in your head or doing it in your heart, reciting in your heart. So they just stand there and they don't say anything the whole time. And even if they were running in their mind, they were running Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim in their mind, their mouth was not moving, nothing was coming out. This salah is invalid because they didn't actually recite anything. And like, yes, they ran it over in their heart, but this is not the meaning of silently. When they say sirran, a lot of the times the scholars will say sirran. And when they say sirran, they mean that you're reciting it in a soft voice where you're not making other people hear what you're saying, but rather you're reciting it silently to where other people around you, they won't hear it, but you can hear yourself speaking. You can hear yourself speaking and whispering this. If all the background noise was silent, you could hear yourself saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You could hear yourself actually reciting this, even if the other people around you don't hear it. And so this is something that's very important for people if they especially when it comes to the arkan, they need to have actually said these in a way where they could make themselves hear their own voice for these things if everything was silent. Of course, they don't need to raise their voice to a point where they're causing trouble for their neighbor, like where he can't focus. But at the same time, this person needs to actually be whispering it out loud, and his tongue needs to be moving with the makharij, like with the different places for the tongue to be when he's reciting these things. So all of this needs to be done when someone is reciting, especially the Fatiha or the Takbirat al-Ihram and Assalamu alaikum. All of these things that need to be spoken, they need to be spoken in a way that you could hear yourself in a very quiet environment. And of course, if everything is loud and noisy, you don't need to raise your voice over that. This is in general, it needs to be this way. If that is the time and whatnot. And so also another point that he brings up after the isti'adha, he says, وَالْجَهْرُ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ وَإِسْرَارُ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ. And he says, and jahr, which is like raising one's voice out loud, reciting out loud when he recites the Quran. Of course, the general principle here with jahr is anytime that that there is no sun outside. Anytime there's no sun outside, then you would recite with a loud voice. So we say Fajr, we'd recite with a loud voice. And we'd also see Maghrib, you recite with a loud voice, no sun. And you'd also see Isha, loud voice. And you'd have your Salat al-Layl, loud voice. All of the Taraweeh, loud voice. And then if the sun is out, then it would be then you would recite silently. As I mentioned, silently, the Israr, which is that you make yourself hear yourself in a silent environment. And it's not something that you raise your voice though loud. And this is if the sun is out in general. So like duha, you would recite when you would recite for the salat duha, then you would recite this with a silent voice. And the same thing dhuhr, asr. And the only exception is, of course, like something if there's the only exception is like for al-Eid and also Jum'ah. These are the exceptions to the rule. But in general, this is the general rule. If the sun's out, then you recite silently. Allah knows best what the hikmah behind this is. Some people talk about that at these busy times it's better for us to reflect and have like that kind of silence while the things are busy around us, and while the things are things are quiet outside, to have this time to ponder the Quran. While normally, like when the sun goes away, then people are more open to listening to the Quran and whatnot, as opposed to the busyness of the day. Well, Allah knows best what all of the wisdom behind this, but this is how it's been narrated. And so also and this would also apply for someone if they're reciting for their nawafil. So so the same thing, if someone was reciting for Fajr, they could recite out loud as well, and this would be sunnah for the sunnah to Fajr. So like for the sunnah, but with the exception of if someone is going to be in a masjid and they're reciting around other people that they're gonna like disturb them, then of course like this sunnah goes away. Then they shouldn't be disturbing other people in the masjid. And the same thing with the sunnah, like for sunnah maghrib or sunnah isha, if they're reciting in the masjid and they're going to be disturbing people with their sunnah by raising their voice, then this is something that they wouldn't raise their voice if they're going to be disturbing others. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so the next thing that he brings up after the jahr and also isra in mawdihi, he says what that mean. And so referring kind of, if we're in the order of that we just recited the Fatiha, then we would have the ta'meen, which is saying Ameen. And of course Ameen can be said, you can either say Ameen with like the short, just a Hamza, Ameen, or you can say Ameen. A lot of times they'll say this is the better way to say it. And so like there's different ways to say that, and with it making it long, Ameen, like this is okay to do as well. And also all of this is good, and it should be done with the imam when he says this. And of course, this is if we hear the imam. If we don't hear him, we say at the end of after ad-dallin, then we say Ameen. This is if we don't hear the imam. And so this is the ta'meen, and this is of course it's narrated that the Sahabi narrated that they used to hear the Ameen from outside, like people could hear the Ameen from outside of the masjid. So this is something that they raised their voice in this. This is something that was raised, and of course the person who's Ameen, it agrees with the Ameen of the Malaika, then he will have his previous sins forgiven. Of course, we should always try to make sure that we do this Ameen alongside of alongside of the Imam after he says ad-dallin, and when he says Ameen, we say that with him. And this is something that is inshallah that it would be a source of us getting all of our previous sins forgiven whenever we say this in congregation. Of course, the amount of like benefits to reciting or like to praying in congregation, there's so many benefits of this, and of course this is of those benefits of reciting in congregation, that the person who's Ameen match or like yuafiqu the Ameen of the Malaika, then his previous sins will be forgiven. And of course, this is referring to the sins that aren't the kaba'ir. And of course, the kaba'ir, they need tawbah, as many of the scholars will always talk about these things. When it comes to kaba'ir, they always need to have specific tawbah, and if you've oppressed somebody, you need to make that right with that person. And this is of course like the hadith غُفِرَ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. This is referring to مَا عَدَى ذَلِكَ, to something that is other than these two scenarios here. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so also he says قِرَاءَةُ السُّورَةِ بَعْدَ الْفَاتِحَةِ, and this is the next thing for someone to do, that sunnah, is for them to recite another surah. And he mentions here, he says surah, which is like a complete surah after the Fatiha. And so the sunnah is to recite a surah, and this is what's narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he would recite a surah after this. And it wasn't, and we don't necessarily have narrations except very, very like minor places that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited like part of a surah. Most of the time it's always that he recited a full surah after this, and with just a few minor exceptions, such as like for the sunnah of Fajr, that the Prophet ﷺ, he would either recite قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He would either recite these two surahs, or the other sunnah for this is that he would recite قُولُوا آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْنَا or ما أنزل إلينا, and he would recite this ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, and then at the other one قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ. And so these two these are the only two places that I know of that it's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ would recite part of a surah. But normally he would usually recite a full surah after this, and this is something that is better for someone to do if they can, to recite a full surah. And like the Shafi'i scholars, they'll talk about that the person, if he was put in a decision between reciting a full surah that's like shorter, or like that's a full surah that's shorter than reciting a certain amount of ayat, then the person reciting a full surah would get more reward for reciting that full surah than someone who is reciting the same amount of ayat. Say it's like 2.5 pages. He recites 2.5 pages from whether it's Surah Mulk or something, for example. And if you recited this, it's a full surah. And if you were to recite a couple pages from Surah Baqarah, then he would receive more for reciting a full surah, because this is something that is sunnah, even if he recited more from the Surah Baqarah. And this is something that is talked about in Qawaid al-Fiqh. And this is an example of an exception to the rule that the more work that someone does is the greater the reward. And so this is, and also of the sunnah for this is that the first surah is longer than the second surah. So in the first rak'ah, that the first surah, like the surah that's recited in the first rak'ah is longer than the second surah. And so this is also a part of the sunnah for someone to do. And also another thing that is important is sometimes there'll be people that they've memorized the Quran, alhamdulillah, and they will want to recite alongside of the imam while they're reciting something in the other surah. And so you'll see that some people, they'll be reciting alongside of the imam. While he's reciting, they'll be reciting silently with him. Like their mouth is moving, they're making the same thing as they're reciting the Fatiha. This is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he commanded the Sahaba not to do this. And there was a time that's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he was reciting in Fajr. And so then he started to cough and whatnot. And then at the end of it, he said, لَعَلَكُمْ تَقْرَؤُونَ خَلْفَ إِمَامِكُمْ. And then he said that I think you guys are probably reciting behind me. And then they said, قُلْنَا نَعَمْ هَذًا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. And then they said, yes, we do that. And this is something that they love to do. And so then he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لَا تَفْعَلُوا إِلَّا بِفَاتِحَةِ الْكِتَابِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا صَلَاةَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَقْرَأْ بِهَا. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, "La taf'alu," like don't do this. And of course, this nafi here would be like something that has a prohibition for this person not to do this thing. And then he said, "Illa," as we have our istithna here for reciting behind the imam, "Illa bi fatihatil kitab." And he says that except for reciting with the Fatiha, فَإِنَّهُ لَا صَلَاةَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَقْرَأْ بِهَا. And this is of course because there's no salah for the person that doesn't recite with this. And so this is of the and this is of the evidences that someone should not be reciting alongside of the imam while he's reciting. They should be quiet and they should be listening to it. And this is also from the ayat that that's narrated, فَأَنْسِتُوا وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَأَنْسِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. And so like this ayat also was revealed in specifically in regards to the people that recite alongside of the imam in salah. With something other than the Fatiha. And this is narrated from a lot of the Sahaba when they talk about the tafsir of this ayah, that this was revealed in regards to someone reciting in the salah alongside of the imam, that they should listen so that they will receive that forgiveness in that rahmah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And also, moving on to the next of these things, he also says, وَتَكْبِيرَاتُ عِنْدَ الرَّفْعِ وَالْخَفْضِ. And so also the takbirat, these are something that are from the hayat. And this is something that is sunnah for someone to make the takbirat while they're going up, and الرَّفْعِ وَالْخَفْض, when they're going up and down from the different motions. And also he says here, وَقَوْلُ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدِ. And so this is also another thing that's sunnah when someone's coming up from the ruku', that they say سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ, and then that they say after they've stood up, رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدِ, or رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدِ, or اللَّهُمَّ رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدِ. All of these are fine. Like these are different versions that are narrated, and they have slight differences, like from a balagha standpoint. But this is for everybody. And in regards to the takbirat, the reason it's sunnah and it's not something that's obligatory as the Hanabila, they say this, is because a lot of when the Sahaba heard this being done, astaghrabuhu, like they found it strange when they heard that people were doing the takbirat when they're moving up and down. They found it as something strange. And then when the other Sahabi that was doing this, he said, this is something that I did, and I'm closest to the salah of the Prophet ﷺ. Then this is something that we know, like the Sahaba, a lot of them, they weren't doing this. And so of course if it was something that had to be done, it was wajib, then there would have been some type of revelation that said this is wajib. And so we would take from that this is something it's not obligatory for someone to do, but this is something that is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, so this is something that's sunnah to do. And that's what takes it away from being obligatory. So of course the Shafi'i madhab, if you miss this, you don't make sujood sahu for missing a takbirah. And so this is something that's sunnah. And also another point, when it comes to Sami Allahu liman hamida, this is for every single person. There's no like evidence that proves that the person who's following the imam doesn't say this. And the evidence that does come up is from the backwards understanding of something. It's not the backwards, I mean like the mafhum al-mukhalafa. And we'll talk about this maybe inshallah in the future when it comes to usul. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said, when he was talking about the imam is to be followed, and when he talked about this in this hadith that the imam is to be followed, he said in this, and وَإِذَا قَالَ سَمِيَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَ فَقُولُوا رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدُ. And so he said, if the imam says Sami Allahu liman hamida, faqulu, so say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. But in general, the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. So in general, we follow everything that the Prophet ﷺ used to do in his salah. And this place, like this hadith, the understanding of it is that after you have said Sami Allahu liman hamida, the sunnah for you guys to say is Rabbana wa lakal hamd after that, because you're in general, you follow what the Prophet ﷺ used to do. And so this is something that, like in the Shafi'i madhab, they're very, very clear about saying that the people need to know that the sunnah is to say Sami Allahu liman hamida, especially for the person who's the muballigh. So if you have someone, the muballigh is the person who repeats what the imam said for the people that are behind that don't hear him. And so this person, if you have, of course now we have microphones and whatnot, but if we didn't have microphones, then this person that comes up from ruku' and we hear the imam say Sami Allahu liman hamida, this person that's a couple rows back or whatever, that makes sure the rest of the people hear, he doesn't say Rabbana wa lakal hamd, he says Sami Allahu liman hamida, just like the imam said, because he's a muballigh, like he's the one who transfers the same thing that the imam's doing, he does the exact same thing. And this is sunnah for people to say when they come up. And of course you'll hear it like in Saudi Arabia, they follow the Hanbali madhab, so of course they took the inverted understanding of that hadith, which is فَقُولُوا رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ. So what they understand from that is that don't say Sami Allahu liman hamida. Of course, this isn't in the hadith itself, like don't say Sami Allahu liman hamida. This is not in the hadith, but rather we take that from other hadiths. And then فَقُولُوا رَبَّنَا وَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ, we say yes, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, so that we would know what we're supposed to say in this place when it's normally said silently. So this is a point where we wouldn't know what to say except that we would that this was like this was said silently. So we need ta'aleem here, like we need understanding here. And so they took that this means don't say Sami Allahu liman hamida, but rather say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. This is how they understood it. And the Shafi'is, they say no, you say both of them from the generality of following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that there's no clear negation of don't say Rabbana or don't say Sami Allahu liman hamida. And this is the area of khilaf, and of course it's not something to get really, of course there's a lot of ijtihad here, but in general this is something that we would always say the Shafi'i opinion, and it's a very strong opinion from what I see, is that everyone says Sami Allahu liman hamida when they come up, and then while they're standing they say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And also for the imam, if there's an imam that's doing this, he needs to say Sami Allahu liman hamida while he's coming up, not after he came up and he's standing in front of the microphone, but rather he needs to say it at the beginning of him moving up. He says it during the motion. And this is the same with the takbirat, but especially in this place, because if someone came late and they came into ruku' and he stands up and they come down to ruku' and then he says Sami Allahu liman hamida, this person here, maybe he thinks that the imam is still in ruku' when he went down into ruku', so he thinks he caught the rak'ah, and so he doesn't do the extra rak'ah that he didn't catch, because the imam was slow on saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, so that he could be in front of the microphone. Sometimes the microphone's on a stand. So like the imam should be aware that while he's coming up, he should be making sure that he's letting people know he's coming up from ruku' by saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, like when he's coming up, so he doesn't mess with people's salah that are behind him. And I've seen this before, where people will not know. They won't know that he already came up, and that he already came up out of the ruku', and he's been standing for a while, and then he says Sami Allahu liman hamida. Of course, this is a mistake that should be avoided, because there's bad repercussions upon the person that thinks that their salah, that they caught that rak'ah and they didn't. And of course, but if somebody is coming in and they see that the imam is standing and he hasn't said Sami Allahu liman hamida, of course, like he didn't catch that rak'ah yet, and so he should be mindful if he can, to make sure that the imam doesn't stand up and then say it and he hasn't made it down yet. Wallahu a'lam. And then he also says here, after this, he says what tasbih and what tasbihu fi ruku'i was sujud. And so he says a tasbih, which is saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim in ruku', and then Subhana Rabbiyal A'la in sujud. And of course, it's like the least of this is 3 times. And for the imam, I mentioned some of these things for the imam in general because he's not going to mention it here. And if any of you are leading, then it's important to know. But the imam that's leading other people in a masjid or in a place that's wide open for anybody to come in and pray with him, he needs to make sure that he's not elongating things. He needs to make sure that the things are at their, he's not overburdening anybody in the salah. And in general, like the Shafi'i madhab, they'll say that when someone is in sujood, that they say this 3 times for the imam. He says 3 times, and this is the most he says it. And then he comes up. And then it's 3 times also for the ruku' as well, 3 times. Of course, this is very, very quick. And someone who's trying to make other dua, maybe this is hard for them. But at the same time, this person shouldn't be holding people in sujood for like a long period of time, especially and he should always be mindful that there's people in the congregation that either have some type of sickness, or maybe they have some type of business that they need to get to, or maybe there's some type of issue with them, and they should never be putting them into that long, going overboard with that. And in general, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to be aware of what was going on around him. So if he heard women's babies crying, if he heard babies crying, he would shorten the salah, and he would be mindful of the people and their needs. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard that one of the Sahabis were making the salah very long and reciting very long and making it hard for them, to a point where some people couldn't stay with it, then he got very, very, very upset and told the imam of that imam, the Sahabi, afattan, and so he said, are you putting people into fitna? And he was very upset about this. And this shows, and he also said to be easy when it comes to leading people in the salah. And of course, when we see the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, and then we see his words and his statements saying something, we don't take the actions of him and then override his words. We'd always put the words if they seem to go. You see, sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, he recited maybe a longer surah. This is something we don't say when we see this is an action, and then we see a word saying don't be to make the salah easy and to don't make it hard. We take the words and we put this before that. And we say this action, if it was done in a place where it doesn't make things hard, or he knew that everybody there was happy with the length of that. And so this is putting these two together. And so in general, there's no going overboard when it comes to leading somebody in salah. No one should be going very overboard when it comes to lengthening the ruku' and lengthening the sujood when they're leading other people. If you're praying by yourself, this is you and Allah, and this is great. But when it comes to you leading other people, you're not leading for yourself. You're leading for the weakest person that's here, or the weakest link that is possible that can be there. And so this is very important. And so this is the tasbih, and also for sujood, like to do it 3 times. Also odd numbers if the person, while they're by themselves, doing odd numbers up to like 11 times. And also the sujood is a place for someone to make other dua as well. The Prophet ﷺ says that the closest that the abd is to his Rabb is while he's in sujood. فَأَكْثِرُوا الدُّعَاء. And so this is in also so to like make a lot of dua while you're in sujood. And of course this is a place where dua is a place that would be most likely to be accepted in this place. And also just to keep in mind the other evidences for making the tasbih in the ruku' and sujood is also and it's narrated in some hadith, is that when it comes to fasabbih bismi rabbika al-azim, like in these ayat that come this way, the Prophet ﷺ said ij'alhu fi ruku'ikum, or al kama qal, that he said to put this tasbih subhana rabbil azim in your ruku'. And so he has this command that says to do it, and he also has the command that says to do it in sujood as well. In the, like if you look at the tafsir for sabbih ismi rabbika al-a'la, like you would also see this comes in tafsir as for this ayat, like to put the subhana rabbi al-a'la. And so to have this in these things, so this is something that there is an order for this to happen. And like the Shafi'is, they see that they putting together the adillah, they don't see that this is an order for wujub, rather they say that this is an order for like istihbab or nadb, because of the other hadith that we mentioned before about the Musayya Salah, because this is what everything that's obligatory is in that. Anything extra is outside of that. And so that's kind of how they took it. But the Hanabila, they say that this is something that should be done. And because of the amr that the Prophet ﷺ said, then this necessitates wujub without any other, like they don't take this other thing as evidence to take it away. And so they say that this should be done at least one time, for that person. So they make it of the wajibat. And of course, to leave the difference of opinion is something that's good for everyone to do. And like, if you know that this is obligatory with some and it's sunnah with us, then to just always do it is the best thing to do, to make sure that you leave the difference of opinion here. And then they would treat it, and if you were to leave this difference of opinion, they treat it like the same as the tashahhud. So it take the same ruling as that. And this is not the view of the Shafi'is, but this is the way of leaving the difference of opinion. But the Shafi'i, they would say that this is something that is sunnah for someone to do from the hayat, and not from the abab. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so also what he says here, وَوَضْعُ الْيَدَيْنِ عَلَى الْفَخِذَيْنِ فِي الْجُلُوسِ. And so this is like putting the 2 hands on the fakhiday, which is the thighs, while he's sitting. And then also he says here, وَيَبْسُطُ الْيُسْرَ وَيَقْبِضُ الْيُمْنَى. And so he says, وَيَبْسُطُ الْيُسْرَ. And so like this is like the bust, it's like opens it up. This is for the left hand. And then he says, وَيَبْسُطُ, which is like he grips, and he said like for the yumna, he would yaqbid. So he would grip it like this, and then the bust, which would be the yusra, which is the left hand, which is open. And then he says, إِلَّا الْمُسَبِّحَ. And so the musabbiha is the first finger. And فَإِنَّهُ يُشِيرُ بِهِ مُتَشَهِّدًا. And so he says, يُشِيرُ بِهِ, what he means by this is point. It doesn't necessarily mean move. This is something that is makruh with the Shafi'i madhab, to move it around, because the hadith that comes about moving is something that addition of and moved it. This addition is something that's shadh. According to like the majority of the Shafi'i scholars, they see that this is something that is shadh. And a lot of the other scholars, they say that this is this hadith, like that part of the hadith is something that's an addition by one narrator, and the rest of them didn't mention the moving. So they would say don't move it, because this is something that is not narrated in a sahih narration. So they'd say it's something that's makruh to move it. And so he says, so he'd say yaqbid, and then yushir bihi, which is like the point with the finger, mutashahida, which is when someone says ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadar rasulullah. And so a lot of times you'll see that people, they do this and then they point it up at that one point in time. And this is what we understand from the Shafi'i madhab here. And also another thing is, there's multiple ways to hold this hand. And so you can have the hand and you can make a ring with it. You can make a ring with your fingers, and then you can just point with the ring. This is one way. Or you can put the hand flat and point with the finger that way. That's a way. It's also narrated that the Prophet ﷺ made the number 53. And this is this number 53 is also narrated, and this is like this number system is a number system that the Arabs the Arab used to use this system with their hands, where they would close their hands and their fingers, and it would tell you the certain number. And so this is something that I learned from Sheikh Ahmed Makrami, and he taught on his explanation of Umdatul Salikin, that he talked about how the counting system works in the Arabs. And so this is basically, I'll give you the counting system, how it works. Basically, you have these 3 fingers, and these are going to make 1, 2, and 3. So you have, this is 1, you would turn it in, that's 1, then you have 2, and then you have 3. And then you have 4, and this is opening up, 4, 5, 6. And that's the number 6. So this is number 6. And then you have 7, 8, 9. And so you have these 3 fingers that have 3 different positions, which makes 9. Then you have here, you have 10. So you have 10, 20, 30. If you break in your finger here into 3 pieces, you have 10, 20, 30. And this is on the outside. It's on the outside. And you have on the top side, then you have 40, 50, 60. And then on the inside, 70, 80, 90. And so there's your numbering system. So it's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ made the number 53. And so you'd have 1, 2, 3, and then you'd also have 50 here. This is 50. So 50 would be here on this part, and this is 53. And some of the like Imam Nawawi, when he sees 53, he says like make it 59, but we still say 53, and so like 59 would be like this. So like they have this, and make this number 59 is what he would say, but like the narration is 53. So this is like the narration to have 53. And if you learn this numbering system, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20. And you can do this, and you can use this numbering system for your tasbih and whatnot. And this is the Arab numbering system, how they would use their hands to make the actual count with their fingers. And so if the Arab showed you this, you would know it's 53. Or if he showed you like a certain number, like this, it'd be like 60, 69. It'd be like 69 or something of this sort. So they would be able to talk with each other with just their hands. They would tell the number by just showing with that. And this is like a numbering system of the Arabs. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And that comes from Sheikh Ahmed Makrami, hafidhahullah. And so and he got that from his shuyukh as well, and he passed it down, so alhamdulillah. And also he says here, so we have the pointing while someone's in tashahhud. And going back to what Abu Shujaa, he says, rahimahullah, he says, وَالْإِفْتِرَاشُ فِي جَمِيعِ الْجَلَسَاتِ. And so he says, an iftirash, with the iftirash is the way that you would sit, where you have your left foot under your buttocks. You're sitting on top of your left foot that's laying flat. And then you have your right foot up, and you have your fingers, or like your toes. You have your toes pointed towards the qibla. And you have your toes pointed towards the qibla, and it's up. And so this is the iftirash, where you're sitting on your foot. You're actually sitting on top of your left foot, and your right foot is pointed towards the qibla. And so this is in every single jalasat, like every single time that you're sitting, this is the way to sit in salah. And so like if someone's sitting because they want to sit from the salah because they're tired, this is the way to sit in salah. And this is the preferred way to sit in salah. And if someone's sitting for the first tashahhud, this is the way to sit. If someone's sitting between the 2 sujood, this is the way to sit. If they're sitting at the end of all of their salah, this is a way to sit for that. And then he's going to mention the second way to sit at the end of salah, and that's the next one that he says here, وَالتَّوَرُّكْ فِي الْجِلْسَةِ الْأَخِيرَةِ. And so he says here in the tawarruk, and like wirk is like the buttocks, or like that thickness at the back of the thigh would be considered wirk. And so like tawarruk is like use and like putting that like you have that sitting on your buttocks. While you sit on your buttocks, instead of sitting on your feet like you were in iftirash, you would stick your foot all the way under. As you would see this, you would stick your foot under that, and you would have it in front of like the toes of your other feet. You would stick it under, and then you would actually be sitting on your buttocks. And this is called tawarruk. And he says fil jilsatil akhira. And so this is the way that you do this at the end of that. And of course, like the wisdom behind like this difference, why I sit this way at the very end, is one, it's like it's easy. Like if you see if someone's sitting this way, it's easy for them to sit this way, and like if they're sitting in this way a longer time, it's easy because they're actually sitting on the ground firmly. And it's also hard for someone to get up. Why is this at the end? It's hard for someone to get up. If you are sitting in this tawarruk and then you want to get up to stand up to pray the rest of your raka'at, it's kind of hard. It's awkward to sit up from the tawarruk and stand up. It takes a little extra effort. But as opposed to iftirash, it doesn't take as much effort to stand up from it. It's much easier to stand from that. But tawarruk is for the last one. Is for the last one in particular. And so this is, and also of the other wisdoms for it is that if you came in late and you see the imam is sitting in tashahhud and you don't know which tashahhud he is, if he's doing the tawarruk, you know that he's in the last tashahhud. And so this is of the things that you can use this to know, okay, is the imam in the last one or is he in the second one? You know, like the second rak'ah. So this is one way to tell the difference. And also the person who sits in the tawarruk, if for whatever reason he is, this is only for the last rak'ah. This is in the last sitting before he makes taslim. So if he's going to make sujood sahw, he wouldn't sit in this because he's going to go back into sujood. So he would sit in the iftirash in that, and if he's at the end. And of course, if he has more rak'at afterwards, even if he's following the imam, he would still sit in iftirash. He wouldn't sit in tawarruk, except right before, if it was the last sitting before he makes the taslim. And then he also says here for the last of these hayat is what taslimatul thaniyah. And so this is the second taslim, which he means like saying after you said assalamu alaikum, and also having wa rahmatullah is also sunnah, then saying assalamu alaikum rahmatullah on the other side, on the left side. So this is the other sunnah for someone to do, and of course starting with the left, starting with the right and then the left, and then also there's a couple other sunnahs that I'll mention here that are important, and these are, one is looking down. When you're praying, as I mentioned this before, like looking down while someone is praying, and the purpose of it is to keep your mind from being distracted while you're in your prayer. And so wherever you are in your prayer, you don't want to be distracted, and you want to have the most khushu' that you can, so that you get the most reward out of the time that you're putting into this salah. You don't want to just be throwing away your time. You want to be getting your reward from this salah and pondering the adhkar that you have. And of course, this pondering is something else that is very important in the salah. Whenever you're reciting the adhkar, try to do your best to understand the meaning of it. Like look up the meaning if you haven't looked up the meaning of it, and try to figure out like extra like meanings for that, or like understand the i'rab for the adhkar that you use, as well as like understand the meaning and make it a part, like that this is something from your heart. And also having khushu' in your salah. And if they're looking down or something, they're going to be still distracted because of things, or maybe someone's they're like praying and they're in a mall or something, and it's like an open space, and there's going to be like people going back and forth, or women and whatnot. Then closing their eyes, there's no problem with closing their eyes. And occasionally some people will say that this is something that's makruh, to close your eyes while you're in salah. And if you were imitating the kuffar, like the Christians or the Yahud, when they close their eyes as a part of prayer, then this is something that's problematic. But if you're closing your eyes just so you're not distracted, there's no problem with this, and it's not makruh. And this is what Imam an-Nawawi talks about in Minhaj, that it's not makruh to close your eyes, as long as you don't fear something for yourself. Like if you're going to get hit by something, if you have your eyes closed, okay, that's something. But as long as there's no as long as you're in a safe space to close your eyes, there's no problem with closing your eyes while you're in prayer, if this is what's going to help you have the most khushu'. And also using your hands to get up when you're coming up from standing, using your hands to get up, and also that sitting. So like after the first rak'ah, when you finish your first rak'ah and you're in sujood, you come up and you sit. And then also you use your hands to come up from that sitting, which is called the Jalsatul Istiraha, and this is this sitting is something that is sunnah for someone to do, and this is also a forgotten sunnah oftentimes, that sitting before standing up from the second and the third rak'ah. And so this sitting, just a small sitting, and then standing up from that and using the hands to stand up, this is narrated from the Prophet ﷺ in authentic hadiths in the Sahihain. And so this is something that's also a sunnah to do, and it's oftentimes forgotten. And this is in general, these are general principles, and there's of course much more that someone could go into in detail with these things. And inshallah, if there's any questions, we'll ask, maybe you guys can ask some questions about what we went over. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.